Capitalism can never stay home. It goes abroad. The ordinary people simply paid the cost of empire.
Previously on True Crimes of the Empire.
In 1952, the ANC began preparation for a joint defiance campaign against apartheid with Indian and communist groups, founding a national voluntary board to recruit volunteers. The campaign was designed to follow the path of nonviolent resistance influenced by Mahatma Gandhi. Some supported this for ethical reasons, but Mandela instead considered it pragmatic. At a Durban rally on June 22nd, Mandela addressed an assembled crowd of 10,000 people, initiating the campaign protest for which he was arrested and briefly interned in Marshall Square Prison. These events established Mandela as one of the best-known black political figures in South Africa. So, with further protests, the ANC's membership grew from 20,000 to 100,000 members. The government responded with mass arrests and introduced the Public Safety Act to permit martial law. In May, authorities banned Transvaal ANC President J.B. Marks from making public appearances. Unable to maintain his position, he recommended Mandela as his successor. Although Africanists opposed his candidacy, Mandela was elected to be regional president in October. In July 1952, Mandela was arrested under the Suppression of Communism Act and stood trial as one of the 21 accused, among them Moroka Sisulu and Yusuf Dadoo in Johannesburg. Found guilty of, quote, statutory communism, a term that the government used to describe most opposition to apartheid, their sentence of 9 months hard labor was suspended for 2 years.
Statutory communism.
Right? It's just like, that sounds so technical, like a technicality, right?
That's
so right. Is that if someone under the age of 18 becomes a communist? Is that what
So in December, Mandela was given a 6-month ban from attending meetings or talking to more than one individual at a time, making his Transvaal ANC presidency impractical. And during this period, the defiance campaign petered out. In September 1953, Andrew Kunene read out Mandela's, quote, no easy walk to freedom speech at a Transvaal ANC meeting. The title was taken from a quote by Indian independence leader Jawaharlal Nehru, a seminal influence on Mandela's thought. The speech laid out a contingency plan for a scenario in which the ANC was banned. This Mandela Plan, or M Plan, involved dividing the organization into a cell structure with a more centralized leadership.
You know what's really interesting about this is whenever you learn about these sort of revolutionary figures in history, the government at the time, they always do things like, oh, they arrest this person for a couple of years, they banish them from the country, they say they can't meet with X and Y individuals. They did that with Lenin, and he kept coming back, and they did that with Mandela, he keeps coming back, and then he overthrew apartheid. And it's just like, a lot of that happened in like the 20th and 19th century with these like political figures where they were like, the powers that be kept allowing them to live and gave them prison sentences or exiled them, and they just kept coming back and kept going. And it feels to me like the imperialists kind of figured out that that's not a good strategy anymore, and that's when they just switched to just killing. They would just kill leaders like this now.
Yeah.
Like, and I don't think a Nelson Mandela in the year 2025 or a Lenin could exist. I think that they would just kill him. They would just kill him as soon as he comes to prominence.
That's not to say that either of those figures couldn't exist, but they would be doing different things. Like, I think someone who would be as bright as a Lenin or a Mandela would be adapting to the material conditions of their time, and then would be doing entirely different things that would skate under the radar just as those guys did. But who knows?
I mean, if they operated the same way. If they operated the same way, they would just be killed. They would just be straight up killed. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's like, if they let these guys live their lives, like just they imprison them for a little bit and then let them out and then imprison them again and whatever, maybe they're avoiding having these guys become martyrs, for a cause. But then, you've got people like all of the Black Panthers that were killed by COINTELPRO in America that were like, the United States was like, oh, wait, no, we can't let these guys live because if we do, then they're going to continue to awaken people. So,
I mean, it could also be another difference in the class. Maybe it is the case that in the third world imperialized countries, having a martyr creates a level of solidarity that it doesn't create in the first world, because we're seeing that when they kill the people lament it, they mourn, they make memorials, but then they go on. They keep going to work. They don't revolt or rebel more as a result.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess part of it is we got to be wary of slipping into sort of a great man of history narrative, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, I guess because history is taught in that kind of way where it is very much like great man of history. But you think about the liberation of like Palestine as an example. How many leaders within Palestine and different armed groups, how many leaders within Lebanon and Lebanese armed groups and Iran and stuff like that? Like, how many of those leaders end up just getting killed? But
Exactly.
the struggle goes on. They have a chain of command. The struggle goes on. I guess it probably would have been the same if Lenin got killed.
Yeah.
Or if Mandela got killed. I'm sure there'd be someone else who we'd remember the same way we remember Mandela.
Yeah, I mean, even here, there's a lot of changes in leadership in Mandela's party that ended up with him being the guy, but it's also because he's very consistent and, well, not even consistent, he adapts. Like, we're going to talk about how he changes his outlook and tries to instruct some younger people. But as I mentioned, the Mandela Plan or M Plan, it involved dividing the organization into a cell structure with a more centralized leadership. And this was a contingency plan in case the ANC was banned. So this will come up later. So Mandela obtained work as an attorney for the firm Terblanche and Briggish before moving to liberal-run Hellman and Michel, passing qualification exams to become a full-fledged attorney. In August 1953, Mandela and Tambo opened their own law firm, Mandela and Tambo, operating in downtown Johannesburg. The only African-run law firm in the country, it was popular with aggrieved black people, often dealing with cases of police brutality. Disliked by the authorities, I can't imagine why, the firm was forced to relocate to a remote location after their office permit was removed under the Group Areas Act. As a result, their clientele dwindled. As a lawyer of aristocratic heritage, Mandela was part of Johannesburg's elite black middle class and accorded much respect from the black community. Although a second daughter, Makaziwe Fumia, was born in May 1954, Mandela's relationship with Evelyn became strained, and she accused him of adultery. He may have had affairs with ANC member Lillian Ngoyi and secretary Ruth Mampati. Various individuals close to Mandela in this period have stated that the latter bore him a child. Disgusted by her son's behavior, Nosekeni returned to Transkei, while Evelyn embraced the Jehovah's Witnesses and rejected Mandela's preoccupation with politics. After taking part in the unsuccessful protest to prevent the forced relocation of all black people from the Sophia Town suburb of Johannesburg in February 1955, Mandela concluded that violent action would prove necessary to end apartheid and white minority rule.
Hell yeah.
You're learning, sir. You're doing it.
Doing what?
Using your imagination, Peter.
On his advice, Sisulu requested weaponry from the People's Republic of China. Hell yeah. Which was denied. Well, that sucks.
Oh, L
Not hell
China.
yeah.
Well, they were right to do it. Although the Chinese government supported the anti-apartheid struggle, they believed the movement insufficiently prepared for guerrilla warfare. And I think they were correct.
Interesting. That's very Maoist.
Yeah, it would make sense that at this time they would have even more familiarity with the situation to be able to make that determination. But with the involvement of the South African Indian Congress, the Colored People's Congress, the South African Congress of the Trade Unions, and the Congress of Democrats, the ANC planned a Congress of the People, calling on all South Africans to send in proposals for a post-apartheid era. Based on the responses, a freedom charter was drafted by Rusty Bernstein, calling for the creation of a democratic, non-racialist state with the nationalization of major industry. The opening words of the Freedom Charter are, quote, "We the people of South Africa declare for all our country and the world to know that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white, and that no government can justly claim authority unless it is based on the will of the people." The charter was adopted at a June 1955 conference in Kliptown, which was forcibly closed down by police. The tenets of the Freedom Charter remained important for Mandela, and in 1956 he described it as, quote, "an inspiration to the people of South Africa." Following the end of a second ban in September 1955, Mandela went on a working holiday to Transkei to discuss the implications of the Bantu Authorities Act with local Xhosa chiefs, also visiting his mother in New England before proceeding to Cape Town. In March 1956, he received his third ban on public appearances, restricting him to Johannesburg for 5 years, but he often defied it. Mandela's marriage broke down and Evelyn left him, taking their children to live with her brother. Initiating divorce proceedings in May 1956, she claimed that Mandela had physically abused her. He denied the allegations and fought for custody of their children. She withdrew her petition of separation in November, but Mandela filed for divorce in January 1958. The divorce was finalized in March, with the children placed in Evelyn's care. During the divorce proceedings, he began courting a social worker, Winnie Madikizela, whom he married in Bizana in June 1958. She later became involved in ANC activities, spending several weeks in prison. Together, they had 2 children, Zanani and Zindiswa. In December 1956, Mandela was arrested alongside most of the ANC national executive and accused of, quote, high treason against the state. Held in Johannesburg prison amid mass protests, they underwent a preparatory examination before being granted bail. The defense's refutation began in January 1957, overseen by defense lawyer Vernon Barange, and continued until the case was adjourned in September. In January 1958, Oswald Perot was appointed to prosecute the case, and in February the judge ruled that there was sufficient reason for the defendants to go on trial in the Transvaal Supreme Court. The formal treason trial began in Pretoria in August 1958, with the defendants successfully applying to have the 3 judges, all linked to the governing National Party, replaced. In August, one charge was dropped, and in October, the prosecution withdrew its indictment, submitting a reformulated version in November which argued that the ANC leadership committed high treason by advocating violent revolution, a charge the defendants denied. In April 1959, Africanists dissatisfied with the ANC's United Front approach founded the Pan-Africanist Congress, the PAC. Mandela disagreed with the PAC's racially exclusionary views, describing them as, quote, immature and naive. And now remember, Mandela had previously denounced others for multiracial collaboration, also when he was younger and less influential himself. Both parties took part in an anti-pass campaign in early 1960, in which Africans burned the passes that they were legally obliged to carry. One of the PAC organized demonstrations was fired upon by police, resulting in the deaths of 69 protesters in the Sharpeville massacre. The incident brought international condemnation of the government and resulted in rioting throughout South Africa, with Mandela publicly burning his pass in solidarity. So a little more on the Sharpeville massacre. On March 21, 1960, a crowd of approximately 5,000 to 20,000 black South Africans had gathered outside the Sharpeville police station to protest against the pass laws. The demonstration was organized by the Pan-Africanist Congress, and participants were instructed to leave their passbooks at home and offer themselves for arrest. As the crowd grew, tensions escalated. Police reinforcements arrived, supported by armored vehicles and aircraft. Some reports suggest stones were thrown at police, though this is disputed. The police were reportedly nervous and inexperienced in crowd control. At approximately 1:15 p.m., without issuing a warning, the police opened fire on the unarmed crowd. The shooting lasted about 2 minutes, with devastating consequences. At least 69 people were killed, though more recent research suggests the number may be as high as 91.
Jesus.
Over 180 people were wounded, with some estimates reaching as high as 2,383. Many victims were shot in the back while fleeing. And as I mentioned, the massacre sparked international outrage and criticism of South Africa's apartheid policies. The day is now commemorated as Human Rights Day in South Africa. In 2024, the site of the massacre became a World Heritage Site. Responding to the unrest, the government implemented state of emergency measures, declaring martial law and banning the ANC and PAC. In March, they arrested Mandela and other activists, imprisoning them for 5 months without charge in the unsanitary conditions of the Pretoria local prison. This marked a turning point in the anti-apartheid struggle, leading some activists to abandon nonviolent resistance. Imprisonment caused problems for Mandela and his co-defendants in the treason trial. Their lawyers could not reach them, and so it was decided that the lawyers would withdraw and protest until the accused were freed from prison when the state of emergency was lifted in late August 1960. Over the following months, Mandela used his free time to organize an all-in African conference near Pietermaritzburg, Natal, in March 1961, at which 1,400 anti-apartheid delegates met, agreeing on a stay-at-home strike to mark May 31st, the day South Africa became a republic. On March 29, 1961, 6 years after the treason trial began, the judges produced a verdict of not guilty, ruling that there was insufficient evidence to convict the accused of, quote, high treason, since they had advocated neither communism nor violent revolution. The outcome embarrassed the government.
That's very interesting that the courts would actually be like, no, he's fine. Like, usually anyone who's accused of like treason or something like that, it's just
It could be the most flimsy evidence.
yeah, the courts work for the state, and generally speaking, the courts are just going to side with the state no matter what at that point. So it's kind of strange that they actually sided with Mandela.
Yeah, I guess sometimes it happens. But it also could be a case where they learned their lesson and the imperialists decided, oh, we can't do that again. We can't let the courts side with these people. But speaking of resembling Lenin, Mandela's disguising himself here. So disguised as a chauffeur, Mandela traveled around the country incognito, organizing the ANC's new cell structure and the planned mass stay-at-home strike. Referred to as the, quote, Black Pimpernel in the press, a reference to Emma Orczy's 1905 novel The Scarlet Pimpernel, a warrant for his arrest was put out by the police. Mandela held secret meetings with reporters, and after the government failed to prevent the strike, he warned them that many anti-apartheid activists would soon resort to violence through groups like the PAC's POCO. He believed that the ANC should form an armed group to channel some of this violence in a controlled direction, convincing both ANC leader Albert Luthuli, who was morally opposed to violence, and allied activist groups of its necessity. And so a little more about POCO. POCO was formed as an armed wing to the Pan-Africanist Congress, PAC, during the 1960s and was known for its aggressively violent sabotage campaign. Unlike other resistance organizations of the time, such as Umkhonto Wesiwe, POCO made no effort to avoid loss of life and was the most anti-white underground movement of its time. Its aim was to overthrow the South African government in order to replace it with a socialist African state. The word POCO means pure or alone in Xhosa, and the organization drew most of its following from the Western Cape and the Transkei. Arguably the largest underground grouping of the 1960s, POCO's strategy intentionally involved killings. Their main targets were Langa and Paarl policemen and their alleged informers, as well as the Transkei chiefs. These would be collaborators with the apartheid regime and their followers. The structure and functioning of the organization was based on the communist cell, where members do not know the identity of their fellow members. Any person who disclosed POCO information was sentenced to death, and about 10 members of the organization were executed for betrayal. So this is like serious shit.
Yeah, that's really hardcore as fuck.
Following POCO's aim of destabilizing the country and inspiring an uprising, the organization targeted Paarl on November 22, 1962. The crowd of 250 men, who were armed with axes, machetes, and other homemade weapons, marched from Mabokweni to the town and attacked the police station, homes, and shops. They also killed 2 whites, Franz Richard, 22, and Rencia Vermeulen, 18. They followed this attack with the violent murder of a family camping at the Bashi River in the Transkei on February 4, 1963. Norman and Elizabeth Grabelaar, their teenage daughters Edna and Dawn, and Mr. Derek Thompson were hacked to death in their caravans. So really brutal, and this doesn't seem like particularly effective or targeted at powerful people. This is just kind of random.
Yeah, it's libidinal.
People across the country became fearful, and the government was spurred to vigorously suppress any potential rebellion. Already strict security laws were strengthened when the Minister of Justice B.J. Vorster enforced the 1954 General Laws Amendment Act, otherwise known as the Sabotage Act, and the 90-Day Law. This law made sabotage a capital offense and gave the minister house arrest and detention without trial powers. Both POCO and Umkhonto Wesiwe were armed responses to the injustice of the white minority state of South Africa, but POCO proved to be more dangerous at the time. Its leaders were less known in security circles, and its approach was much more brutal and potentially powerful as a movement, sowing mass terror. Due to apartheid's repressive response and the virulently anti-white stance of POCO, it found itself without the mass support it needed, and the organization fell apart. So getting back to Nelson Mandela here. So, for a more successful organization that did occasionally use violence, Nelson Mandela, inspired by the actions of Fidel Castro's 26th of July movement in the Cuban Revolution, in 1961 Mandela, Sisulu, and Slovo co-founded the Umkhonto Wesiwe, meaning Spear of the Nation, and abbreviated MK. Becoming chairman of the militant group, Mandela gained ideas from literature on guerrilla warfare by Marxist militants Mao and Che Guevara, as well as from the military theorist Karl von Clausewitz.
Hell yeah.
Wait, I thought he took inspiration from our beautiful liberal heroes. Your founding fathers and
Yeah, he liked Gandhi.
Yeah, Gandhi and
I thought he liked Teddy Roosevelt or something. What?
No, that's the thing. I mean, people don't know this about Mandela, but he liked Gandhi, and then he learned, and then you don't hear about him. It's kind of like how they buried Greta Thunberg. You don't hear about her anymore now that she's a vocal genocide opponent.
Mm-hmm.
Although initially declared officially separate from the ANC so as not to taint the latter's reputation, MK was later widely recognized as the party's armed wing. Most early MK members were white communists who were able to conceal Mandela in their homes. After hiding, see, that's how you be a good one. That's how you be a good white communist. You have to hide militants in your home.
Yep. Underground Railroad.
Yeah, literally. After hiding in communist Wolfie Kodesh's flat in Berea, Mandela moved to the communist-owned Lily's Leaf Farm in Rivonia. They are joined by Raymond Malaba, Slovo, and Bernstein, who put together the MK Constitution. Although in later life Mandela denied, for political reasons, ever being a member of the Communist Party, historical research published in 2011 strongly suggested that he had joined in the late 1950s or early 1960s. This was confirmed by both the SACP and the ANC after Mandela's death. According to the SACP, he was not only a member of the party, but also served on its central committee.
damn.
So yeah,
based.
Mandela's based.
Yeah, that's great.
That's fucking awesome. And it's sad that he had to renounce it once he won, and that's about what you would expect, I guess. He had to choose if he was going to be isolated from the world or not, basically.
I imagine that trial would have gone differently if that information had been public.
Oh,
Yeah.
for sure. Oh, yeah.
So, operating through a cell structure, MK planned to carry out acts of sabotage that would exert maximum pressure on the government with minimum casualties. They sought to bomb military installations, power plants, telephone lines, and transport links at night when civilians were not present. Mandela stated that they chose sabotage because it was the least harmful action, did not involve killing, and offered the best hope for racial reconciliation afterwards. He nevertheless acknowledged that should this have failed, then guerrilla warfare might have been necessary. Soon after ANC leader Luthuli was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, MK publicly announced its existence with 57 bombings on Dingane's Day, December 16, 1961, followed by further attacks on New Year's Eve. That's crazy.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's a good way to announce. That's a good way to announce that you,
You have
exist.
announced
yeah.
your presence for sure.
Yeah, we're like, damn, how do we announce that we exist? And like, maybe we'll try 57 bombings and we'll see if that works.
Ah, the old Heinz 57.
This might get their attention.
57, and they're like, oh, what if we did 58? And it's like, that's fucking excessive. Don't
You're
do
wild,
that.
man. We'll let this guy in.
Yeah. Yeah.
The ANC decided to send Mandela as a delegate to the February 1962 meeting of the Pan-African Freedom Movement for East, Central, and South Africa, PAFMEXA, in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Leaving South Africa in secret via Bechuanaland, on his way, Mandela visited Tanganyika and met with its president, Julius Nyerere. Now, I put this in here because I just love the quotes that I've always seen from Nyerere in memes. And so Nyerere is, of course, famously quoted as saying, "The United States is also a one-party state, but with typical American extravagance, they have two of them." But I just was looking for that quote because I wanted to get it word for word if I'm going to put it in here. And on his AZ quotes page, which I link here, they have like his top 25 quotes. And this guy had so many bangers. He said, quote, "Small nations are like indecently dressed women. They tempt the evil-minded." And I love that one so much because people, when they try to victim blame women for like rape culture, will say that you shouldn't be scantily clad. It's like, no, that only tempts evil-minded people. Like women can be scantily clad or even nude, and that's just a human body. It only tempts people who want to do evil things and like do things to people without their consent. Like,
100%.
so yeah, just very clever and very succinct, unlike my overwordy explanation of it. But he also said, quote, "Education is not a way to escape poverty. It is a way of fighting it." It's very good.
Yeah.
And then the last one I put here, he said, quote, "Decisions made in Washington are more important to us than those made here in Dar es Salaam. So maybe my people should be allowed to vote in American presidential elections." I think that's great.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. And then I linked his AZ quotes page. Go look that up.
Oh, I'm looking at it. Yeah. There's no time to waste. We must either unite now or perish. That's really good.
That's so awesome. Yeah, whenever an American says, I've had this happen to me all the time because I'm not from America, but people be
Why do
like,
you care,
"Well, you're
bro?"
not even." Yeah, they're like, "Why do you care? You're not in America." It's like, bro, shut. Oh my.
Do you have any idea? Like,
Yeah, notoriously America, a country that doesn't have any impact on any other country in the world, as we all know.
and then in the
Yeah.
next breath, those same people will be bragging about how America dominates the world with its military and like semi-ironically, or then just unironically, if you push them hard enough and they get mad. Like, that's what they always turn into.
Oh my God, Russia is tampering with our election. Meanwhile, we're doing coups in Latin America and all over the world all the time,
Yeah.
interfering in other people's elections.
Russia also only spends like a couple of $1 million on propaganda for US elections. It's
Yeah.
a very small
Yeah.
amount of money. It's like, bro, if that's enough money to sway your elections, then you suck. Like, I'm sorry.
You better
Like, if you can just
fucking-
throw a couple of $1 million at the elections of the most powerful country in the world, and that influences it, then maybe the most powerful country in the world isn't that powerful.
It's actually not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Maybe we're the third world country, guys.
Are we the
Eastern Europe.
I think it's starting to become clear.
Arriving in Ethiopia, Mandela met with Emperor Haile Selassie I and gave his speech after Selassie's at the conference. After the symposium, he traveled to Cairo, Egypt, admiring the political reforms of President Gamal Abdel Nasser, and in April 1962 he went to Morocco to meet the king to ask him for £5,000. The next day he got the £5,000 along with some weapons and training for Mandela's soldiers, and then went to Tunis, Tunisia, where President Habib Bourguiba gave him another £5,000 for weaponry. He proceeded to Mali, Guinea, Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Senegal, receiving funds from Liberian President William Tubman and Guinean President Ahmed Sékou Touré. He left Africa for London, England, where he met anti-apartheid activists, reporters, and prominent politicians. So he's literally just going on tour, like recruiting and gathering all these weapons and resources. It's like,
That's awesome.
it's crazy to watch, yeah.
That's so cool.
Upon returning to Ethiopia, he began a 6-month course in guerrilla warfare, but completed only 2 months before being recalled to South Africa by the ANC's leadership. And going back just a bit, as I mentioned, the 1960s is when international pressure against apartheid begins. And in 1961, South Africa was declared a republic and left the Commonwealth. A referendum on becoming a republic had been held on October 5th, 1960. The Afrikaner-dominated National Party was avowedly Republican and regarded the position of Queen Elizabeth II as a South African monarch as a relic of British imperialism. It's like so audacious of them, but like the infighting is still good to see, I guess. So
Yep.
the National Party government subsequently organized the referendum on whether the then Union of South Africa should become a republic. The vote, which was restricted to whites, the first such national election in the Union, was narrowly approved by 52.29% of the voters. The Republic of South Africa was constituted on May 31st, 1961.
God damn it. This just makes Australia look bad. we had a referendum to get rid of the Queen as well, and it lost.
You just kept
Yeah, no, most people are like, no, keep the Queen.
Yeah,
Oh,
we
I
actually
love
like
the
the
Queen. Yeah. So that was in the 90s too, by the way. That was in the fucking 90s. Or like the early 2000s, regardless. And then here's like
In the
apartheid
60s?
South Africa in the 60s is like, nah, having a monarch is fucked. Like,
Damn.
that's so funny. Australia fucking sucks, dude. Come on. Bro, apartheid South Africa got rid of the Queen.
Really, guys?
And
Come
we
on.
didn't.
This is a great development.
Yeah.
So in 1962, the United Nations General Assembly established a special committee against apartheid, which aimed to coordinate international efforts to combat apartheid, and passed several resolutions condemning apartheid, including Resolution 1761, which called for imposing economic and other sanctions on South Africa. South Africa's isolation in international sports began in the mid-1950s and intensified throughout the 1960s. The International Table Tennis Federation, oh no, sorry,
Oh shit.
not them. I'm sure they're a very serious organization. I'm sure they've got a lot of influence.
Secret organization that runs world affairs. It's well known. The International Table Tennis Federation killed JFK. We all know that.
The International Table Tennis Federation severed ties with the all-white South African Table Tennis Union in 1956, preferring the non-racial South African Table Tennis Board. So I mean, I can't even make fun of them, like just being good, but stop teasing them for no reason.
That's just awesome.
Basically, JFK said table tennis, that's not a real sport. And then boom, blammo, shot in the back of the head.
In 1959, Jamaica became the first country to impose economic sanctions on apartheid South Africa by banning imports from the country. This move was followed by other countries, including Nigeria, which led a 32-nation boycott of the 1986 Commonwealth Games due to the UK's ambivalent attitude towards sporting links with South Africa. South Africa was excluded from participating in the Olympic Games from 1964 to 1988 due to its apartheid regime's policies of racial discrimination. The International Olympic Committee, the IOC, initially banned South Africa from the 1964 Tokyo Olympics, and subsequent boycotts and threats of boycotts by African nations and countries in the Soviet bloc led to the country's continued exclusion. So yeah, based Soviet bloc and African countries, of course, like in league with each other. Why wouldn't they be?
Remember when countries actually had the will to put sanctions on an apartheid state?
Mhm.
Remember that? That was nice.
It's not like that
Be nice
anymore.
Yeah, it'd be nice if and you know all the fucking liberals who talk about how evil the Soviet Union was, and it's like, well, the Soviet bloc says here, right here, the Soviet bloc, one of the first countries to put sanctions on apartheid South Africa. If there was still a Soviet bloc around today, I wouldn't be surprised if they put sanctions on Israel.
Absolutely.
As the apartheid government felt pressure from the rest of the world, it applied more to the resistance at home. Nelson Mandela was arrested in 1962 and initially sentenced to 5 years in prison for incitement and passport violations. Documents found at Lily's Leaf Farm, a secret hideout, linked Mandela to MK, Mkhonto Wesigwe, and the sabotage campaign against the apartheid government. The Rivonia trial began in October 1963, with Mandela as the government's accused number 1, alongside 7 other defendants. On June 11, 1964, Mandela and his co-accused were convicted, and the next day they were sentenced to life imprisonment. On September 6, 1966, Hendrik Verwoerd, the Prime Minister of South Africa and architect of apartheid, was stabbed to death by Dimitri Tsefendas, a temporary parliamentary messenger in the House of Assembly in Cape Town. Safendus, a Mozambique immigrant of mixed racial descent, attacked Verwoerd as he entered the parliamentary chamber. Verwoerd had survived an earlier assassination attempt on April 9, 1960, when a deranged white farmer shot him in the face at an agricultural show. After recovering, Verwoerd attributed his survival to, quote, divine providence.
Not deranged white farmer, more like based white farmer.
Yeah. More like
Yeah.
one of the only good ones.
Yeah, there's like they found the one good white farmer in South Africa. I don't know. How do you survive being shot in the face, though? That's crazy.
Had to have been a shotgun at a distance where he just got sprayed like a Dick Cheney vibe.
Mhm.
Oh, I get you. Right.
On the day of his death, Safendus, who was not normally allowed on the parliamentary floor, walked onto the floor and approached Verwoerd, who was seated on the government bench. As Verwoerd rose to speak, Safendus stabbed him repeatedly with 2 silver daggers. The assassin also attempted to strike Frank Waring, the Minister of Sport and Tourism, but only managed to slash his trousers.
Oh, I'm seeing the links with the Table Tennis Federation here. The Minister of Sport and Tourism. Interesting.
They're an elite group of assassins.
Verwoerd's death sent shockwaves through South Africa and the world. Safendus was arrested and later convicted of murder. He spent the remainder of his life in prison, dying in 1999. Verwoerd's state funeral was held in Pretoria, attended by 250,000 people. Shitty people who like apartheid. I forgot I put that in the notes.
I love you to put in parentheses.
During the 1970s, more than 3 million people were forcibly resettled in black homelands called Bantustans. In parallel with the creation of the homelands, South Africa's black population was subjected to a massive program of forced relocation. The government made clear that its ultimate aim was the total removal of the black population from South Africa. Wild.
So it's just genocidal intent and the forcible removal of 3 million people. That's also genocide.
Yep.
So there we go. South Africa did genocide as well.
Yeah.
Because under the Genocide Convention, forced displacement is genocide, and genocidal intent is also part of it. And they made it clear that they were going to remove the black population, either kill them or displace them.
Mm-hmm.
Connie Mulder, the Minister of Plural Relations and Development, imagine this, the Minister of Plural Relations and Development, told the House of Assembly on February 7, 1978, "If our policy is taken to its logical conclusion, as far as the black people are concerned, there will be not one black man with South African citizenship. Every black man in South Africa will eventually be accommodated in some independent new state in this honorable way, and there will no longer be an obligation on this parliament to accommodate these people politically." But this goal was not achieved. That's
So
wild.
that's literally the same as like Israelis saying, well, why can't Palestinians go to Egypt? Why can't they go to other quote unquote Arab countries? That's a very common refrain. They're saying the same thing here about the various groups that resided in South Africa. So, well, Africa's just, there's lots of countries for black people in Africa. So just go to one of those. You're a black person. You're all the same.
Yeah.
It's the exact same kind
So
of
fucking
logic.
racist.
Yeah, it's
So fucked up,
fucking
man.
horrendously racist. It's awful. Yeah. Just
Yeah.
straight up genocide. And I guess Israel took notes from South Africa
Yeah.
as
That's what
well,
it seems like.
by the looks of it.
They adapted and innovated, but
Yep.
But like Israel, this goal was not achieved. Only a minority, about 39% in 1986, of South Africa's black population lived in the Bantustans. The remainder lived in South Africa proper, many in townships, shanty towns, and slums on the outskirts of South African cities. In June 1976, a student-led protest erupted in Soweto. The Soweto uprising was a response to the government's attempts to impose Afrikaans on the black students. The Black Consciousness movement, which emphasized black pride and self-reliance, had a significant influence on the protesters. On June 16th, students in Soweto began protesting against the use of Afrikaans in schools, leading to clashes with police, which resulted in a minimum of 176 deaths, with some estimates ranging up to 700 fatalities. The violence was widespread, with incidents reported in various parts of the country, including Port Elizabeth, Cape Town, and Tembisa. By August, violence died down, but by then the death toll had already exceeded 600. The next month, in September 1976, U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger met with South African State President Vorster, but the Soweto uprising was not discussed.
There he is, that motherfucker.
Yeah.
What was discussed? Like, what? Henry Kissinger was like, you need to kill more people.
Yeah,
What was
I
that?
can't even
Like,
imagine.
I don't know what does Henry Kissinger,
He
I don't
sounds
know.
like German, because he had a brother who intentionally shed his German accent, and Kissinger did not do that.
Really?
Yeah, he always just
Yep.
sounded like a fucking Nazi.
Mm-hmm.
Kissinger had a German accent?
He's from Germany.
Yep.
He was a German Jew who
Right?
escaped the Holocaust.
I mean, good
Yeah.
on him for escaping the Holocaust. But
Well, I mean, there's all
what, so
kinds
he
of like.
escaped-
I think it's unless I'm confusing him with Soros. Like I could be really putting my foot in my mouth if I'm confusing the two. But like I was under the impression that both of them have the same story, which is that they got out, but they were also like well connected and wealthy for their whole lives. So there's a lot of stories that basically claim that they sold out their own people in order to do that and like feather their own nest, basically. And considering what they both have done in their lives since then, I wouldn't put it past either of them.
Yeah, Kissinger was a Jewish refugee, and he moved to the United States in 1938. But that's
Right.
wait, how the fuck do you get into American government if he's not a citizen?
He was just a statesman. I think he just was like a professional and then got into like just state crap. He was never like a, because I don't think he was a politician. I don't think he was ever elected to anything.
He was only appointed to like certain cabinets basically by the presidents that were like, yeah, no, this guy's great. We need him, you know?
We love
Like,
this
'cause-
ruthless, cold-blooded fucking murderer.
Yeah, he knows how to do imperialism really well.
So Kissinger was never like voted into anything.
No.
Oh,
Like
fuck,
ever.
fuck no. Yeah, no, he's one of many Germans who emigrated to the United States like post World War II or before and got involved in either politics or you know, actual statecraft, like working behind the scenes, like with the Pentagon or, you know, like the military industrial apparatus.
Man, that is such a foreign concept to me. Like, I'm pretty sure, didn't Trump, when Trump just got in, he just put Elon Musk in his cabinet. And Elon
Yeah,
Musk
I mean,
wasn't
shit, dude.
fucking-
Trump's cabinet is like that cavalcade of all the clowns, like the billionaires and like, you know, the Vince McMahon's wife. Can't remember her name.
Yeah, do you know how unusual that is, like, internationally? Like, no other country that calls itself a democracy that I'm aware of, certainly not my country, doesn't, like, you can't just be like, that random cunt over there, he's in my government now, and I want him in my government, he's in it. But it doesn't work that way.
The fucking
cabinet has
Argentinian
to
government,
be-
yeah.
Even Israel's government, like, Israel can't do that. Israel,
Mm,
Netanyahu, the fucking, you know, the Nazi who runs Israel, his cabinet, they were all elected into those positions. And yeah, sure, they're all Nazis and they were elected in that position. They're all scum, absolute filth. But like,
yeah, but Jared, isn't
That's
that worse? Doesn't that mean you guys like them? Like, at least we could have the excuse, like, hey, we didn't vote for Kissinger. Like,
that's true. But you voted for the guy who liked Kissinger and wanted
yeah,
him to
I
come over. That's
no, there's really no escaping it.
It's like-
it's big
it's-
people
it's-
all around.
It's very
Yeah.
similar. It's actually very similar to like Javier Milei in Argentina,
Oh my God.
because he's another Trump guy, and he basically did the same sort of thing where he just appointed random people to his cabinet. Like incel 4chaners basically were put into his
Surprised he
government.
didn't appoint his dogs
Yeah, like it's just insane.
and his
It's
sister.
insane.
He may have appointed his sister. I don't actually know that. I could look stupid again. But anyway, let me wrap up this couple paragraphs here and then we'll be done for the night. So I had said when Kissinger visited, the Soweto uprising was not discussed. So the exact number of fatalities remains disputed among sources. The police and government initially downplayed the extent of the violence and casualties. This led to underreporting or inaccurate initial estimates. The apartheid government also did not maintain comprehensive records of the uprising, including casualty figures. The South African History Online website estimates 176 deaths, while the Soweto uprising, How a Student-Led Movement Changed History lesson plan by the Morningside Center, cites 300 to 400 deaths. The Zinn Education Project's resource mentions hundreds of deaths, while the Soweto uprising entry on Student Encyclopedia states, quote, dozens of students were killed. The Hector Peterson Museum, located near the site where Hector Peterson was shot, estimates over 500 deaths. Regardless of the specific number of people murdered by the South African regime, their deaths were not in vain. The Soweto uprising marked a major turning point in the struggle against apartheid. And so that's where we'll leave it for tonight. And next time we'll start talking about the township revolt.
Oh man, yeah, that's fucking crazy.
I didn't know Kissinger was just some fucking guy. That's crazy. He's
Oh,
just
yeah,
some
no.
guy? Like he
Dude,
never
yeah,
was
no.
in politics? Like
He was basically like the diplomatic agent that orchestrated all of the shit in the Middle East and like in North Africa too. With like he's a guy who was doing an insane amount of diplomacy, quote unquote. You know,
That's a good word for it.
yeah,
didn't he play a major role in Vietnam as well?
It was like
Yes.
the My Lai massacre in Cambodia. Like, I think his role was to prolong the war, to make it more bloody, make it worse for the Vietnamese people, and I think he's pretty much responsible for the My Lai massacre. Like everybody always puts that on him. So
yep, yeah. He was very much involved in Vietnam and all that shit too.
Yeah, I'm always shocked to hear when I hear someone like to find out that he was also basically a Holocaust survivor. He fled
Yeah.
Nazi Germany and then was like, damn, he like fled Nazi Germany and was like, that was horrible. I'm going to do that to Vietnamese people now.
Which again, of
Like,
course, shows you who are the accepted minorities and who are the accepted refugees that get into the U.S. government. So weird. Because especially he gets away with the like Nazi accusations. Like he could be as far right, reactionary, literally murderous and genocidal as he wants, and he's not going to get the label because he fled the Holocaust. It's like,
Yeah, hurt people, I guess, to pull an Instagram
we're gonna
phrase.
give him that excuse. Jesus.
Yeah, no, it's like it's not even like an excuse. It's just like because like obviously you see the shit that happens and you're like, oh yeah, that's crazy that happened to my people.
Yeah.
It would be awesome if I did that to other people too.
Wild.
It's fucking crazy.
All right, you guys want to wrap it up there? I think this was another good one. Had a good time.
Yep.
It was a lot of fun.
That was a good one,
Thank you guys again for joining me. Thanks,
All right.
guys.
Awesome.